Last January, I got to spend 3 days at Bob Bergman's shop in Postville, Wisconsin. If you've been into blacksmithing much at all over the last 50 years, and certainly over the last 10 years, you know the name Bob Bergman. He carved out a niche for himself in his 50-year tenure in the Postville blacksmith shop. By the way, there were 2 blacksmiths previously, each with 50 years on the same site. Bob just completed his term of service and sold it to an up-and-coming young man who's going to keep the tradition going. But I had a marvelous time. Bob and Nana rolled out the red carpet. They were kind, they were engaging, they were packed with information, and it was neat beyond description to see their life up close and personal. Come with me to Postville. You're in for a treat. Well, this is a day that I have sort of considered, but never really considered to be likely. And that is, I've been able to make a trip back into the Midwest and include a visit to Bob Bergman's Postville blacksmith shop. You may know that Bob has helped me 2 or 3 times over the last 15, 17 years that I've been dabbling with blacksmithing. He's answered questions, and I've been aware of his sort of the space he occupies in the blacksmith community, and it's a big space. And so not only have I received information from him, but coming into the actual site where he's been practicing as a professional blacksmith, a full-time, take it seriously, get some work done, and support yourself with blacksmithing, which is an accomplishment, for 50 years, right here, and with an expansion that we'll show you in a minute. But when we get inside here, I'm going to have Bob describe to you the history associated with this site, which came into existence in the mid-1800s. He'll have the details. But Bob owned this, bought this, owned it, and operated right here for his own 50 years. And it's still a blacksmith shop. And it now has transferred to new ownership that we'll introduce you to in a little while, but it's almost a fairy tale blacksmith story of Americana continuing as Americana, which is noteworthy in and of itself. So come on into the Postville blacksmith shop. I think you're going to like it. Bob, thanks for having me over here.
You're welcome, Scott.
I want to, before we step in here and show these people sort of where you operated out of for 20 years, have I got that right? And then expanded. Tell us about the circumstance of you meeting the man who was smithing out of this building, transfer of ownership, all of that, because it is really just a spectacular story.
The realtor had a house in 4 acres for sale. On the way out to look at it, he drove through this little nearly abandoned village called Postville, which had a church, the town hall, a general store, the blacksmith shop. And as we came through town, the realtor pointed out this dilapidated building and said, "This is that's the old blacksmith shop." I said, "Oh, really?" It kind of piqued my interest. Came, looked in the windows, kind of looked like it was abandoned, but I asked around and found out that no, the blacksmith was still alive, had moved to New Glarus, was in his mid-80s, expressed an interest in buying it or renting it, because I had a background of carpentry and car mechanics and motorcycle repairs, and he let me rent it for a year, and I think he thought there's no chance that I would ever survive. The trade was dead, he told me, and the trade he had was shoeing horses, repairing wagons, and sharpening tools, sharpening plows. You can see here in some of these old photographs what the condition of the building was. This was pretty much what it looked like when I bought it. There's another picture here, very deteriorated. Some other pictures here are from the late 1800s with the original blacksmith who lived upstairs when I moved here, there were remnants of curtains and horsehair plaster in the living quarters. Here's another historic photo, kind of what life was like before electricity. And here you can see the chimney was here. By the time I got it, the chimney had been moved to a different location.
How long did it take? How long did it take to go from where it was when you bought it to what we're looking at right here?
40, 50 years, bit by bit. That's myself in about 1972.
How old were you there?
26. This photo here was taken in 1970. Life magazine had a photo contest of a day in the life, and it was July 4th, 1970, that you would send in a picture of what you were doing on that day, and that's what I was doing that day. This shows the old shop, the kind of repair work I was doing. This is a firewood buzz saw.
Those are lethally dangerous, by the way. Robert Frost has a poem, Out, Out.
Yeah. This was a cheese kettle, Swiss cheese kettle, copper, that somebody had bought and wanted to have converted, cut in half and made into like a range hood. But basically I was mainly doing farm repair.
Okay, so we got two young guys. Point to you so that
This
people
is
know.
myself.
There's the blacksmith.
And this was my good
And there's
friend,
the carpenter.
Bill Taylor, who actually did pewter work. In doing my restoration of the building, I often found things stuck in the walls. And this was an example of, this was made by the original blacksmith, this man here, Andrew Thompson. And what this was a pair of tongs to pull teeth.
Wow, go to the
Blacksmiths
blacksmith.
pulled horses' teeth, and they also pulled human teeth. Another item I found was a Civil War vintage bayonet.
Whoa. Whoa.
So the building, as I took it over, right now everything's clean and tidy. The result of 50 years of repair work and my wife's presence, and she works here now. Her business, she was a metal smith also, and her business took off as I outgrew this shop, so she moved in here. But there was a concrete floor that was made with local lime, produced in a local lime kiln kind of concrete, very poor quality. It had deteriorated to basically a dirt floor. The walls were stone. There were rings mounted in the wall where the horses were tied up. The rafters were exposed. The floor joists from above that had horseshoes hung from nails. It was really, the atmosphere was so wonderful, and with the country store across the way, the characters that came through, on the east side is an area settled by Swiss immigrants. On the west side was an area settled by Norwegian immigrants. Just very colorful characters. You just never knew who was going to walk through the door. In 1972, I had an offer to buy a circular sawmill, which I bought, moved, and kind of added into the business. In the good weather, I sawed lumber, and there was a good demand for lumber because people were still making small bales of hay and needed to fix their hay racks and barn repairs and fencing. And it was more commodity kind of work rather than luxury work. There was a good demand for rough sawn lumber, and I had the ability to do the maintenance and fix A lot of fix-it work at a sawmill. Another income stream that I developed was buying and refurbishing tools and equipment, power hammers, machine shop equipment. Bought out shops complete and would upgrade the equipment that I had and sell off the rest. That was a nice sideline. It ultimately led to the manufacture of a power hammer called the KA75, which was a nice. We had 8 ways to make a buck.
The property that came with the purchase of the Postville blacksmith shop had enough room for Bob to put up a 7,000 square foot engineered steel building around 1990-ish just across the street. And this gave him the capability to take on larger work, much larger work, and whole new areas of fabrication and repair. He commented a couple times that just the building itself brought more serious and more profitable projects to his business. The space, the bridge crane, the robust electrical service meant that Bob and his crew could do anything. Here are just a few pictures of some of the architectural ironwork or house jewelry, as I refer to it, that Bob and his team produced out of the new, larger space, and then sent not only all over the Midwest, but all over the country. It's beautiful. You heard Bob say that he had 8 ways to make a buck, and that's true, and it's one of the things that made him successful. But none of the other ways of making a buck were anywhere near as beautiful as the artist blacksmithing and the architectural ironwork that he produced. Bob had a couple of metalworkers who became trusted associates and friends over the years. This is Dieter Weigang. Weigang? Sorry, Dieter. But he's worked for Bob for 23 years. And this good hand, Dieter, came to Postville from Romania, by way of Germany, then to Chicago, and then right here in this little crossroads in Wisconsin. Bob said the other key man was Terry Suthers. He was shop foreman, worked for Bob for 26 years, and actually ended up becoming a partner. Terry is a master mechanic, and he took the things that Bob taught him about forging, and in Bob's words, took them to the next level. He was a big part of Bob's success at Postville. Now, one of the things that made a real impression on me in my time with Bob and in his shop was the chance I had to forge on his Nazel 3B. Nazel 3Bs are the legendary apex power hammer in, small-scale blacksmithing. And this one is perfectly tuned right here in this shop by Bob and his guys. Bob demonstrated some basic power hammer forging processes for me that I knew I wasn't quite doing right, and now I can do better. He helped me with some of what he learned from Clifton Ralph over the years that Bob had Clifton right here in his backyard, including Clifton's forging philosophy that he would introduce and describe as VARF. It stands for volume, area, resistance, and force. It seems simplistic when you first hear about it, and it becomes incredibly subtle and satisfying and useful the more you think about it and the more you look for ways to apply these 4 concepts to your smith work.
Now, steel fabrication, as we think of it today, is literally the child of the blacksmith, and will always stand on the shoulders of the men who toiled at anvils, most of whom, incidentally, passed out of existence because they could not evolve into our world. The second smith on this site, from whom Bob bought the business, was just sure that blacksmithing was done. Turned out it wasn't done for a younger man who was hungry and could adapt.
Now, separate from the blacksmithing, at Postville, at the new building, seeing the examples of some of the ironwork that he's made and looking through the books in which his work is published, separate from all of that, separate from the trip to Scott Forge and the gigantic forging presses, separate from all of that, Bob has a woodlot. He has 40 acres of rolling eastern hardwood forest. And he has a Wood-Mizer sawmill, and he has a lathe. And so as his second creative outlet career, Bob makes beautiful wood turnings out of wood that comes from the logs that grow on his property and that is cut on his sawmill. And it's where he and I really had an uncommon ability to have a conversation. We both had circular sawmills when we were kids, and now he's continuing with artistic wood projects in his retirement. I don't know what the likelihood would ever be of meeting another person approximately the same age, approximately the same stature, who has followed so many similar, or at least non-typical, but similar life choices. Sawmilling and blacksmithing, self-employment, engaging with other people. I don't know, but maybe the takeaway for me is there are people that we should have met sooner. There are friends all over this blue planet, circling in the immensity of the void. There are people everywhere where if we knew them, if our paths would cross now or would have crossed then, they would have been treasured and part of the friend group, which is essentially family that we pick, right? So maybe the takeaway from Postville Blacksmith Shop is this: don't jump around in your life. If you get a chance to stay in one spot and do one thing that's satisfying, do that. Bob stayed 50 years, did his duty, provided service for his community and the larger community, shared his information. He was not distracted by greener grass across an imaginary fence. And it was a blessing for me to see the little corner of the world that he and Nana continue to steward. And that's the way he looks at it. He stewards his part of the planet. He stewards his friendship. He stewards his knowledge. And that, my friends, is a good example for all of us. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.
So I'm out in the yard with Nana Showalter today. She's Bob Bergman's bride, and she is a fine artist and a blacksmith, and these things don't always happen in the same package, but she's giving me a tour of her studio here at home and some of the yard art pieces that she makes and sells and that show up all around the community and the country for that matter. And I'll tell you what, that an artist's approach to blacksmithing has things to teach all of us. So let's see what she's got going on in her studio. So one of life's little dilemmas when you're a blacksmith and you're trying to make nice things for folks, I'm thinking of house jewelry, architectural ironwork, is whether you're interested in being considered in some way an artist or a mechanic or just a blacksmith. And this kind of illustrates that metalwork can be as profoundly artistic as any other medium, perhaps more than many other mediums, because of the effort and the element of risk that is involved in working metal, because metal doesn't yield easily. And so, for those of us who maybe are laying awake night trying to think about how we want to start our blacksmith business, I can tell you that if it doesn't look something like this, don't make the mistake of calling your shop a studio. This is a studio, and it's unmistakable, and the difference between art and craft gets a little easier to figure out in a space like this. Wow, Nana, so what was this building like? Tell me, what was this?
It was originally built out of the wood from the wooden silo that went with the existing
Oh, no kidding.
barns built in the 1800s. So someone turned this into a chicken coop. That was its function in the beginning. It has a hydrant connected to the well, so there's water. And so initially there were 100 chickens in here, and then when Bob bought the place, he used it for ponies when he had the kids living here, and then it was abandoned for a long time. So when I got here 38 years ago, it's pretty much a shell. And after graduate school, my project was to put windows in, and I built the workbenches, and I insulated and drywalled, and I ran all the electric wires up to the box and hired an electrician to come and hook it up for me. So that was the beginning. It was the beginning of after graduate school.
Talk to me about the difference between art and craft, that thin, blurry line between art and craft.
How much time do you have? Well, one comment I can make about the claim of artist or blacksmith, you can obviously be both.
Mm-hmm.
And my approach as an artist and a maker of three-dimensional objects is more about the goal of making the object express what my intention is, by whatever means. So I had to let go of the idea of being a purist in terms of blacksmith. Everything has
Yep.
to be, I have to make every element that goes into it. That was initially how I had to approach it. I should make my own tools, very strict. It was very constricting. The idea for me is to make the object as I want it seen. And whatever skill set it takes to get me there, I'll use. So I'm a fabricator, welder, and I use blacksmithing techniques, and I use found objects. It's more about the end piece as opposed to being a purist in any one of those methods.